All right, good afternoon, Mr. Timberlake. How you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right, so yesterday I came in your classroom. I came in third period and did a quick walkthrough. It was your third period class, and it was from 212 to 224. I just want to kind of just take the time out to give you feedback on how what my observations were, and then kind of talk about some next steps. Okay. All right, so I always want to start off by saying what I saw that went very well. Okay, we call that our praise or the globes. So first of all, just thank you for allowing me to come in your classroom freely and be able to just provide feedback to you so you continue to grow as an educator. All right, I want to start off by saying your use of technology in the classroom. Every student had access to their technology. They actually had their assignment. They had a Mathmania assignment. Based on physics you embedded within Google Classroom, and students were able to access that and be able to annotate and utilize the Google Classroom in that Word document. So thank you for allowing the increase in use of technology. And we know that's something good to have in class because that encourages participation, engagement. It also allows you to monitor students' work and hold them accountable for doing the work as well. Another benefit for utilizing technology in Google Classroom is also to provide that written feedback that students can go back and refer back to it. So thank you for doing that. One thing I also noticed that I want to praise you on as far as utilizing a math strategy called GUESS. I believe the math department is using GUESS as well. I know you're teaching physics and they do a lot of calculations. So it was good to see that students were actually able to let me know what does GUESS mean and why it's important to use that when they're doing calculations. So I'm glad to see that you incorporate those strategies for annotation for those calculations. All right, so let's actually dive into the lesson. What was the learning goal of the lesson yesterday?
Previously, my students have shown trouble with calculations, so we purely wanted to work on that in the last period as well. So we just mainly focused on how to use the formulas, identifying what formula to use with which question, and how to manipulate the formulas to get your answer.
Okay, do you have an actual standard?
The standard was 7B, 7B.
Okay, and what was the different type of calculations? I know velocity was one of them.
There was velocity, there's calculating the wavelength and calculating the frequency as well.
Okay, how do you feel about that lesson? Do you think the students met their learning goal by the end of the class period?
Those that were trying and being receptive to the material, yes. A lot of them were getting a hang of it as the questions, they started to realize that it became repetitive, and that's what I was looking for them to be able to look at a question and know this is the formula I gotta use, this is what I have to do. Not, oh, I don't know, and just give up and sit there. Like I saw a lot more of them trying to work it out and a lot less of, I don't know, so I'm not gonna do anything.
Okay, so what about the students that did not understand? Why do you think that was the case?
Some of them, they haven't been paying attention, honestly. They haven't been writing their notes down in the Google Classroom as well.
Okay.
I can say overall, that was just a lack of their effort in trying to learn, I could say.
Okay, all right, thank you for sharing. All right, so that brings us to one thing I want us to focus on is one of the key elements of an effective lesson delivery is the presence of exemplars of student work. Okay, why do you think it's important to have exemplars?
It gives a baseline for students, I suppose, to understand what's being asked of them and what they should do.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. So one thing that is very important, we stress as far as your exemplar. Where's your exemplar in hand, right? And when you're planning for upcoming lessons, that exemplar should be completed prior to any type of student work that you're doing. The benefit for that is that it allows you to actually come up with that thought process of how you want students to answer those questions or solve a problem, right? The benefit of that is that when you do it in a place of as if you're think about your highest level student, right? You want to actually stamp what is it that the students need to be able to know? What is that they need to be able to show? So when you internalize it and you work on it yourself, you are now at a better advantage of being able to assist and help those students when providing feedback. So remember, you're thinking about your highest level student responses, right? Of course, you're the expert, but you wanna actually dive in and see what is it that I want my students to be able to master this standard. So the importance of it is, as you was walking around the room and you was providing feedback, that presence of that exemplar will allow you to gauge what is exactly what I'm looking for of that student, okay? So just think about it, everything you want your master student to be able to show, that's what you're going to provide, so you can quickly address those misconceptions. You can also identify, students' gaps, if they have any gaps, as well as students on the right track. So it's very important, that is pretty much your to-go to, because oftentimes that when we in teaching and we going, we may forget some things that we really wanna stamp in the lesson. But if we have that exemplar that we can reference, we keep us focused and also keep the students focused. Okay. All right, so at this time, let's just kind of look at some examples of some exemplars. I have an Algebra 1 exemplar, because we're dealing with math calculations, and I also have a biology exemplar. What I want you to do is just take a moment and just kind of just look at the two, and I'm gonna ask you 3 questions. So just pretty much the math sample and the biology sample. So for the first one, just take a look. What does the exemplar include? So what are some things that you see that includes?
Showing of work and the formulas are used, as well as how they got to their answer.
Okay. Anything else you see?
Elimination of wrong answers.
Elimination of wrong answers.
That's about it.
Okay, the process, the strategies, okay. So what is the purpose for including these things on the exemplar? What do you think the purpose is as a teacher to prepare for the upcoming lessons?
To
do this
have
practice.
the correct answers at hand for when you're going over the work, so you know what the right answer is while you're teaching the kids.
Okay,
Also, like you said too, so you can have a model of work that you wanna show the kids and how it should look and what they should do.
yes, very good. So what we want them is their whole thought process. So in order for them to be able to demonstrate that, they actually have to see us do that, right? And we also have to keep in mind, what are some common misconceptions that students may have, or even possible questions that you wanna plan according to, and that's what you wanna stamp on your exemplar, so you can be prepared quickly to respond to those students' needs. Okay, and the last question, why is it important for teachers to have completed exemplar prior to the lesson? Why is it important to have it done prior to the lesson?
So you're better prepared for the lesson.
Okay, what does that actually look like in the classroom?
You're able to, you already have a notion of the misconceptions that the students will come to you with, so you already have the right answer to give them, to steer them back to what they should be learning.
Okay, thank you, correct. All right, so based on our discussion today, what do you think is your next action step or goal for the upcoming lesson? Based on what we discussed, what would be our focus?
To definitely better prepare for my lessons in the future with better exemplars for my students to model after, with going over different equations or problems.
All right, so, yes, so as I wanna kinda go back to the observation. So the reason why I wanna stamp, the exemplar creation, and that's very important to have prior to, because based on observations, yes, the students were on a computer, they were working within their groups, working on the math mania. You were walking around, you were addressing students that had problems with questions, but you didn't have the presence of the exemplar. So where you can simply say, okay, what was step 1? What is step 3? Where should you be? And you can kind of guide them with your exemplar. And another thing, at some point in time, you went to the board and you called the class whole group and you was going over the different type of problems. And there was a calculation problem where it was velocity. And you was working it through, you was doing some cold calls, some kids were responding, but there was kind of like a disconnection there. So you wanted to stamp that, so you decided to work through the process, but the calculations wasn't already done. So if you would've had the presence of that exemplar, right there to where the calculations kind of already done, where you'll be more prepared.
Smooth
And,
transition.
yeah, smooth transition, you'll maximize your time. So you won't be doing it on the spot in the moment as the kids are learning. So that's something that would be very beneficial. So just think about how impactful that would be if you already had that at that time, especially calculations. Okay. All right, so we're gonna stop your action step, which is create exemplar for your student work. So anytime you have your DOL, of course, or any type of student activity that you're doing like you did yesterday, you wanna make sure you have an exemplar for that, right? You wanna already have that ready to go, seal of approval, address any misconceptions off to the side, or any, guided questions you wanna add, but you wanna stamp all your thought process on that student exemplar prior to class. So, some things I wanna make sure we stamp and make sure we punch, and let me know if I'm talking too fast, is in order to have a quality exemplar, you must have an annotated question. So a perfect annotated question. So let's say you have 4 questions, make sure it's annotated correctly. You wanna have details. You wanna also restate what the question is, so that's part of the process. Each step of the solution is clearly shown, so you wanna identify step 1, step 2, step 3, especially with guess. The first will be given, okay, and then a U stands for, what's the U stand for?
I think it's
So we look as far as guess, is the, I believe, I had it written down, the unknown. So, what's the given? Okay, class, what's step 2? Well, we need to identify the unknown. And then step 3 will be the equation, substitute, and solve. So that's very important that when you're walking around, you could actually stamp and communicate that, and then you can actually have kids, communicate that to you as well. All right. You wanna identify the answer of some sort. So if it's a box, a circle, kids need to be identified what is the correct answer. You should be able to see that clearly. Okay. And then also, I always wanna make sure we justify why answers is correct. And then if there's an answer choice that is incorrect, why? So we wanna make sure our students are always justifying, so that we should see that presence on your exemplar as well. So be able to also address common misconceptions that you can kind of put on the side, and that would actually leads us to a more of a smoother transition as far as aggressive monitoring. When you're walking around doing those laps, you clearly know what you're looking for and what students need to be able to show. All right, so at this time, we're going to plan for practice, okay? So what I would like for you to do is look up your activity, Mathmania, and I want you to pick one problem, and I want you to kind of script what would you say, and what are you actually looking for? So just find like a problem that you're gonna kind of just talk it through, as far as what would that entail, what was your example of what happened, and just kind of talk to me about that.
So for the question of what is the wavelength of a wave who has 5 wave crests and 20 centimeters, the exemplar, I would definitely underline what's given. So we have a wavelength who's and then 5 wave crests and 20 centimeters. So that's the information that's given. The unknown is like, what is the wavelength? That's what we're trying to solve for. And with the equation, I would emphasize with this question, there is no equation, because we don't have enough variables that are just given, but I would instruct the students to also draw out what that looks like so they can visualize it. And I always practice with telling them, how do you measure wavelength? Is crest to crest or trough to trough? So they would measure between the 5 crests, and they would understand 5 divided by 20 is 4. They count between the crests, you get 4 wavelengths, and that's how you get to the answer.
Okay, so everything that you said, you would stamp that on your exemplar. So yes, the students will have their assignment in a Google Classroom, however, you will print that out, and then you will have that on your clipboard to where you can, use that with your progress monitoring, okay? All right, so with that being said, I look forward to coming to see you next week with the presence of your exemplar. Do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
All right, you have a wonderful rest of your day.